Or should I ask Rabbi Warwick?
Ask Rabbi Warwick. Yeah, he's definitely more lenient about this. Okay. Ayin Test Amud Beis 79b1. Here we go. We are we're talking about this these two courtyards that open up into this. They both have. Remember, we had the picture the other day. We have these two courtyards, and kind of in the back of the courtyards, just for simplicity's sake, they both have these rooms, and then there's like this shared middle room which is filled with straw, and that acts as a barrier between the two courtyards. So they didn't make an eruv, right? They didn't make an eruv, and the Mishnah said they're allowed to go ahead and both take their animals could take straw. We spoke about exactly how their animals are able to take straw, but then the Mishnah said if the straw pile diminishes lower than 10 tefachim, the Mishnah said shnei masurim, then it is forbidden for both of them to take more straw if the haystack is lower than 10 tefachim. Okay, so the Gemara says shma mina. So what could you infer from the Mishnah? The fact that they're not able to continue taking straw at this point, that means they can't carry in this courtyard. Yorin habayim b'Shabbos asurin, that new residents who come to Chatzar on Shabbos are prohibited. Okay, now you ask yourself, of course, we know that. If new residents come on Shabbos, we had a whole discussion a little while ago, that when new residents come on Shabbos, let's say you have the non-Jewish neighbor who shows up on Shabbos, so the Jewish neighbor who wasn't part of the Eruv shows up, who didn't partake in the Eruv shows up on Shabbos, it's Asr. So everyone agrees that was a discussion we had not that long ago, and everyone agreed that would throw it off. In other words, if let's say we were all neighbors, and we all had our homes, and we all contributed to Eruv Chatzeros, and this guy who wasn't here, he shows up on Shabbos, we're all messed over, okay? Unless he does bittul, etc., etc. But we did have a discussion all the way back on Yud Zayin, on Daf Yud Zayin, so way back when, where Rav and Shmuel argued when there was a wall between two courtyards and the wall falls on Shabbos. There, we had a machlokes as to whether or not that impacts things. In other words, if a new neighbor comes, if someone new comes into the block, someone who lives here comes on Shabbos, that definitely throws off our joint eruv. But if a wall falls down on Shabbos, there was an opinion. One opinion said, then of course it ruins everything, and there's another opinion that says no. Since everything was good and the wall fell down, bottom line is we maintain the original eruv, kind of similar to what we have for eruv tchumen. So once it was good when Shabbos began, it doesn't change anything. Even though structurally it changed, we maintain things all the way through Shabbos. And their one opinion says that no, it does change things. This was machlokes. So this Mishnah, the fact that the Mishnah says that when the wall diminishes on Shabbos, they're not able to carry any more in that courtyard, right? That they can't take any more from the pile, meaning they can't carry in the courtyard, implies that if a wall changes on Shabbos, if a wall collapses on Shabbos, then even though it was good when Shabbos began, now it's no longer good, right? That we don't care about how it began when Shabbos, how it looked when Shabbos began. If it changes on Shabbos, it really changes the status, and that would seem to weigh in and clarify a machlokas, the debate we had earlier on. So the Gemara says no, maybe there's no proof, because what the Gemara says, maybe we're talking about a case dilma de'im atme etmol. Maybe the haystack, when it says that both chatzeros are prohibited from carrying, it's not talking about a case where it happened on Shabbos that it got diminished. We're talking about a case where on Friday it got diminished. And now saying on Shabbos you can no longer carry because on Friday it got diminished. In other words, there's no clear proof against one side. Okay, fine. Now we go on to the next line of the Mishnah. The Mishnah said, Keitzedu oseh. So let's say it got diminished, whether it's on Friday or on Shabbos, depends on the opinion. But the bottom line is certainly on Friday, if the haystack got reduced, so what do you do? So Noel is beso. So what do you do to permit at least one party for carrying? In other words, both parties can't carry now if they didn't make Erev Chatzeros, but how does at least one party carry? So Noel is beso. That person should lock their door, lock their house, and relinquish their rights. Now remember the picture, right? You remember how this looks? So again, you have there's there's two courtyards. They each lead into three rooms. Okay, they each have their own outer shed, and then there's one shared room shed. Okay, so we're saying if they don't have eruv chatzeros, and at least the one neighbor's nice and says I want to let my neighbor carry. So what do? He locks his door. Okay, blocks off his side, and he relinquishes his rights to the courtyard. Okay? And then the person in the other courtyard is able to carry. The Gemara asks, Tarti, why do you need both? If you close the door, then you've just created a wall. If you relinquish your rights, you relinquish your rights. Why do you have to do both these things? So Gemara says, Hachi Kamar. So Gemara says two answers. Either Noel es besa o mevatzos shusho. Either lock your house or relinquish your rights. Either one will work. You don't have to do both. Okay, that's one answer. V'baisema lo olam tarti. Maybe the brisa actually should be read literally. That you have to do both. Okay, why would you have to do both? Kevan to dashpe, because it's the middle house, it's something which is normally shared, and he's so accustomed to using that middle house. Asti tatsula, the person might come to carry the straw, even though he went ahead and renounced his rights, or even though he went ahead and locked his door. But we're afraid, since it's something which is so used to doing. In other words, normally bittul rishus is sufficient, but over here you have this shared pile of straw between them, and it's normal for the person to keep on going and taking stuff from this space. Therefore, in order to prevent that, because there's a concern that a person is going to go ahead and do something that he's so accustomed to doing, you have to do two precautions, like two things. Even though technically you only really have to do one. Closing the door is really sufficient. It creates a barrier. Or bittul reshus is enough because now I'm no longer part of it. But since I'm so used to going there, I have to go ahead and do both. Make sense? Okay. Says the Gemara further, Hu asr v'chaver mutter. The Brisa continued and said, if you relinquish your rights, or if you lock the door, or do both, whichever approach you take, then the person who just, the person who locked his door and relinquished his rights, he is prohibited, and his friend is allowed now to carry. As says the Gemara, pshita. That's obvious. Like, why do you have to say that? We know that that's how bittul reshus works. If I'm a vatzel reshus to you, then you're allowed to carry. I'm not. Okay, so why do you have to say this? So the Gemara says, the hadar idach uvatzel lechavre. We're talking about a case where after I relinquish to you, right? There's two of us in this courtyard. I relinquish to Tzvi. Tzvi goes ahead and relinquishes back to me. Okay, and the Gemara is saying that you're not allowed to do this ping pong relinquishing rights. Where we had this discussion earlier, right? Am I allowed? Because this could be very convenient, right? Let's say we didn't do every chateres. Me and Tzvi live in a courtyard. We didn't do every chateres, so no problem. So Shabbos begins. I say, Tzvi, I'm a vatal mershus to you, and then you could go and carry. And then I say, Tzvi, I want to go read a book now. Okay, no problem. I'm a vatal mershus to you. Fine, fantastic. I go outside with my book, and then I say, okay, I'm holding my book now. You want to go bring? I'm about. Not allowed. And that's what the Gemara is saying. When it says that he's allowed, he's not allowed, it's saying only this is allowed. You can't do anything else that will ever change that. So basically, you can't do this back and forth, mivatzal, bittul reshus, back and forth. Okay. Then the Brisa taught, the last line, the Brisa said, the Brisa said that similarly, if you have a pit of straw between two Shabbos tchumen, okay? So basically, you have a city over here and a city over here, and whenever I do this, I look at my screen. They can't see it. City over here, it doesn't work. Okay, city over here, sorry, you have to be in person. City over here, and you have straw in the middle. People and the tchum end on the straw. Basically, the straw is the line. People on both sides are allowed to be taking from the straw onto their side of their tchum. Okay, both allowed. So the Gemara says, Pshita, why would you think it's any different? Bottom line is, what's the concern? The concern is you're going to take from one side and bring it to the wrong side. Like, okay, tchum is at the end of the day rabbinic, and therefore, in as much as there is no concern of, in our Mishnah, the Mishnah said you're allowed to, the animals are allowed to take from the straw, even though it may possibly lead to, at the end of the day, they may carry, which is a rabbinic prohibition over here too. They're allowed to take from the straw, and they might go to the wrong side. Okay, also it's rabbinic. In other words, what difference is there between them? Why would you have to say, also when there's straw between two tchumen, you're allowed to be taking from the straw in the middle? Why would that be any difference? The Gemara says there is a difference. Lo tzricha. So the Gemara says pshita. It's obvious. Lo tzricha. The Gemara says no. It is actually necessary. The Rabbi Kiva darma tchumen daraisa, because the Rabbi Kiva, who said the laws of tchumen are biblical. Remember we had this discussion way back when. Are the laws of tchumen rabbinic, which is the opinion of most, or is it biblical? So according to Rabbi Kiva, the laws of tchumen that we're not allowed to walk beyond 2,000 amos is a biblical prohibition. So Ma'adatema, I would have said ligzar, that the rabbis would be more stringent by the pit of straw between two Shabbos tchumen, because dilmas lechluf, a person might come to switch and by mistake take straw beyond their tchum, which according to Rabbi Kiva, which we're saying our mission now is now Rabbi Kiva, you may would be a biblical violation. Kamash Malan says even though according to Rabbi Kiva it's biblical, there is no prohibition whatsoever, and you are able to use this middle space. Okay, let's turn the page, start a new Mishnah, and now the Gemara says, how do you make a shitufei muvos? What is shitufei muvos? Again, let's review. We have Eruv Chatzeros. Eruv Chatzeros is you have one courtyard, right? If this was one courtyard, we have a house here, house here, house here, house here. This is our courtyard, it's walled in. Then we go ahead and we all contribute and we have our courtyard. But that's Eruv Chatzeros. But let's say there is a street now. You have your courtyard over there with you people, and my courtyard here with my people. And there is the street, the mavoy over here, and we want to carry in the mavoy. Now again, the mavoy is a mavoy which is somewhat closed off. It has a lechi, has a korah, blocked off from the public domain partially, but we want to carry in the street. Okay, so what do? We do something called shitufei mivos, which is we have a collection between all the courtyards that open up into it. You could also be part of the courtyard. Everyone's part of the courtyard. Fine. Bottom line is, so you have these streets which are in between and open, a bunch of courtyards open in. So what do you have to do? You have to have a wine that's collected. I go to your house, give me some wine, 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 and now we have shitufei mivos. Obviously, it's very cumbersome. It's one thing to go to my 5 neighbors in my courtyard, 3 neighbors in my courtyard. To go to my courtyard, and then have to go to your courtyard, then have to go to your courtyard, that's quite cumbersome, and therefore the Mishnah says there is a way to do this which avoids that cumbersome practice. What is that? So says the Mishnah, what is like the easier way to make shita for a mavoy? A person takes a barrel containing their own food, and says that the barrel belongs to everyone in the mavoy. Okay, so basically say, I'm giving this barrel to everyone in the mavoi, umizaka lehen, and then how do I give it to everyone in the mavoi? Right, they're not here. How do I give it to them? So I give it to them through umizaka lehen aidei beno uvita gdolim, through an adult son or an adult daughter, vaidei avdo v'shivchaso evrim, or through a Jewish servant or male or female, vaidei ishto, or through one's wife. Aval ein mizaka, but you cannot confer ownership lo aidei beno uvita ktanim, through a child who is a minor, v'lo aidei avdo shivchaso knanim, nor a non-Jewish slave, because halachically what they get, their hand, literally their hand is like his hand. In other words, what happens is a minor child. I always tell this to my kids when they give me a hard time, but it's not yours, it's mine. When they have a minor child, what they have is not theirs, it's mine, right? And the same would be true for a slave, okay? That basically they don't have the ability to acquire something. To acquire something on behalf of someone else, you need to be an independent party, right? So an adult child, a Jewish servant, a spouse, that would all work, but it does not work for a minor or for a slave, okay? So basically what they would do...
You still need all these people around.
Sorry?
You still need all these people.
What do you mean you know those people?
All these other people that you're conferring ownership to, they have to be there.
No. That's the point. I'm able to go. I could turn to you. I could say, so you know where this is extremely relevant? This is extremely relevant. So we don't make Erev. You probably have not made a shutuf mavos in your life. Neither have I. But we do something. I do something every once in a while on behalf of which I acquire for the entire community, which is. So there is this idea that the Rabbi of the shul is supposed to do so on behalf of everyone in the shul. How do I give it to you? Do I go and say, hey, give me your Erev Shulin? That would be rather cumbersome, right? So what I do is I take that matzah and I take that egg or whatever it is I'm using, and I give it to someone to acquire on behalf of everyone else, right? So, and they go ahead and they have to lift it up. We'll see how much they have to lift up in a moment. But they go ahead and they lift it up and they acquire it on behalf of everyone else. I can't just do it. So when you do it for yourself, which is what you're supposed to do, not rely on me.
You do that for every
It's tricky. It's
okay,
a case. No. You're doing the right thing. You should do it. There is very briefly. There is a concept that the community rabbi is supposed to do it on behalf of their community. But as a backup, and the poskim say it only works once. It only works once. They do. Yeah. Okay, whatever. Ask a shaila before you. Sorry.
Like ever once for like.
Ask a shaila. Okay. Sorry. You should do it. What?
Well, she's asking you something.
Very good. Ask again. Okay. Bottom line is very good. So the truth is there is a bit of machlokas actually about in Maseches Nedarim this lineup shows up, but a wife is missing. Right? There's a discussion about what is the status financially. So there is independence, but it's not entire dependence financially. So it is a little tricky. So basically, the way the poskim come out is that ideally you should give it to someone else. So ideally, I usually go to a neighbor to do it. But if I'm stuck, for whatever reason, then Hindi will do it on behalf of everyone. So whatever. Bottom line is you should all do your own Erev Shulin. But if not, you can ask Jesse, and he'll tell you what to do. Okay, fine. Bottom line is, I'm Rav Yehuda. The barrel, with regards to the Shtuvim Avos, tzarich la'agbiya min hakarka tefach. So the person acquiring it, it's not enough just to look at it. They have to pick it up on behalf of everyone else. Okay, so I'm a Rava. Fine. Otherwise, it remains right. Then it still remains in the domain of the original owner. There is some discussion if this is a special dispensation for Shtuvim Avos, but normally you'd have to pick something up 3 tvachim from the ground. Typically, we ask people to lift things up 3 tvachim in order to really make an acquisition. Again, if it's just sitting there, it has to be some action which demonstrates a change of ownership. So basically, it has to be lifted up. The question is how much. Here Rav Yehuda said it's tefach. But again, there are those who say in other spaces it has to be done 3 tvachim. Okay, Amarava. Hani tarti mili savi de Pumbedisa marinhu. These 2 laws, okay, were taught by the elders of Pumbedisa. Okay, the elders of Pumbedisa taught these 2 laws. Okay, so the elders of Pumbedisa, the Gemara in Sanhedrin says, Rav Yehuda and his yeshiva, chadaha. One is this halacha that the barrel has to be lifted to tefach of the ground. Idach, the other halacha is hamekadish. Person makes kiddush. Im time lo lugma yatza. If they drink a mouthful of wine, you fulfilled your obligation. Vim lav lo yatza. But if you drink less, you do not fulfill your obligation. Very important. Some people sometimes make kiddush, and when they do, they go, they take a little sip, and you don't fulfill your obligation doing so. It's a problem. So you need to drink malod lugma of your entire cheek full. It's about 2 little shot glasses. Is typically, it really depends. It varies by person, but 2 shot glasses amount. Whatever. Drink. This is not how much the cup has to be. The cup has to be 3 to 4.5 ounces, depends on different opinions. But in terms of drinking, it's important that you drink Velo Lugma of a cheekful, so the person making kiddush typically is the one who's supposed to drink the more larger amount. Technically, one person there could drink that amount. So let's say the person making kiddush does not want to drink the wine, does not want to drink whatever, they give it to someone else, as long as someone there, I remember, I was at someone's house and they made kiddush and they took a little sip, so I just took a lot of wine and just drank. I looked like an alcoholic, but the point is that I was, someone had to drink a significant amount in order to fulfill the mitzvah of kiddush.
Good wine?
No. What's it called? So whatever, fine, it is what it is. But fine, that is the halacha. Again, milolum of one person, ideally the mekadesh, ideally the one making kiddush, has to drink a cheekful in order to fulfill the obligation. Again, 2 ounces is typically seen as a good amount for your full cheekful. Same thing for Abdallah, yeah. Every time making kiddush, yeah. Amar Rav Chaviva. There's discussion about by a wedding, if a person has to, it's not really kiddush, but there are some who are makbid. There is a certain rabbi in town, you'll notice, whatever, depends if he's at the wedding, but sometimes after, so typically the chasna and kala will drink like the tiniest sip because they're afraid they're going to spill and all that stuff. But this rabbi always goes and he'll walk up, he's like very chilled, and walk up and he'll just take a big gulp from the cup after. And he's doing this for halachic reasons. He want to make, but that's not agreed by all. But for kiddush, this we have to do. Amar Rav Chaviva. Okay, this ruling, the following ruling was also said by them. What is that? Amar Rav Yehuda Shmuel. You're allowed to make a large fire on Shabbos to warm the room for a woman who just gave birth. Okay, so a woman who just gave birth is in a precarious position. Baruch Hashem, we live in a time where the survival rate for giving birth is quite high. But back in the day, without modern medicine, it was a quite a dangerous situation. And even nowadays, we treat a person who just gave birth with a lot of leniencies, right? They don't fast Yom Kippur, and we do anything we need to do. But the bottom line is, it's someone who's ill, and therefore the Gemara says you're allowed. The rabbis Bava Batista, the elders Bava Batista said you're allowed to make a large fire for her, okay, to warm her up. Savamina. The Gemara, we initially assume l'chaya in for a woman who gave birth, yes, l'chololo, but for a regular sick person, we don't do so. In other words, for a regular sick person, if they're cold, warming them up is not going to make much of a difference. Okay, mosik sham in. We also assumed that when it said that you can make this fire, it's only in the winter. Okay, we're at 79b3. Mosik chamalo, but in the summer where it's already hot, it's not so dangerous, and therefore you don't have to make a fire. Itmar, however, this is incorrect. Amar Chia bar Avin, Amar Shmuel, hikis dam and a person let blood and got cold. Okay, letting blood was rather common back in the day as a way of, for medicinal purposes. So they feel cold afterwards. Okay, so which could be dangerous. It's potentially dangerous. Osila, but it's not not the same. Fine, but the bottom line is, it's a person who is somewhat dangerous. Osala Majur b'Shabbos, you're allowed to make a fire. Ba'afila b'Tukuvas Tammuz, even in the summer, you're allowed to do so. In other words, bottom line is, anyone who is potentially dangerously ill, you are allowed to do things which are biblically prohibited for them. And that's halacha. We know if there's any situation where a person is a sick person. If a sick person in your house, if a person is really not well, really sick, or hospital, whatever it is, you're allowed to do anything. Of course, if you could have a non-Jew do it easily, you should do so. But if for whatever reason it's not easy to have a non-Jew do so, you're allowed to do biblically prohibited, actions in order to take care of their health. That is all 100% permitted. Okay, fine. Amar Meimar Hanami Sabid Pamadiz Amrina. One more ruling from the elders Pamadiza. The Itzmar Misfat Ezohi Ashira Stam. What is a tree that we could assume to be an Ashera tree? Again, I think we mentioned the other day, Ashera trees were the popular avodah zarah of the time in Israel. That was what they served. Again, they served it because Asherah trees, vegetation, agriculture, that was something which was very much the focus of the people of in Israel, because they needed rain, they needed planting. This was that type of society. So how do you know it's an Asherah tree? Like, what's an indicator that's Asherah tree? You just see a tree. Is it an Asherah tree? Is it a regular tree? Amarav kol shemisharsei ovdei gula mishor masa. Any tree that you see the idols attendees guarding. If you see like a guard outside of a tree, that's a good indicator. And they're not eating the fruits. Like, okay, there's a reason they're there. Okay, this seems pretty straightforward. Shmuel disagrees. Says going to Amri says for sure that case, but Shmuel says even in a situation where the attendants say Hani Tamri l'shichra devei nitzrfei, we're going to use the dates from this tree for beer in the temple of the local idol Nitzrfei. Okay, one of the idols, where they drink on their holiday. In other words, not only in a situation where they don't touch the fruits, even in a situation where they do eat the fruits, but they only eat it on the holiday, that also would be an indication that it is a tree for avodah zarah. And once again, the elder Pumbedisa said to me, Hilchasa kevasi Shmuel, the halacha follows the more stringent view of Shmuel, that would also be an idolatrous tree and you should not partake in it. Okay, so this is a little bit of a tangent from the elders of Pumbedisa who taught a bunch of halachos, unrelated halachos, and tomorrow we are going to go back to the laws of Shidduchim Avos. Have a great day. Have a good Shabbos.
So wait, they didn't